I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Mike.
Handle adversity with sound systems.
Ms. Pot.
So I'm Teresa Mangioli, as I mentioned earlier. If you still need precinct delegate forms, I've got them here. I have the privilege of introducing Tanya Schumacher, depending on if you're.
Call me Tanya.
Call her Tanya. Tanya is running for the Attorney General position. Tanya's been a lifelong resident of Michigan and has been an attorney for 24 years, a long time. She's been a state representative. I knew her from the Republican Women's Club many years ago when she first got elected as a state representative, and now she is a state senator. She gets the dubious distinction of having the title of President Pro Tem of the Michigan Senate, which means she tries to keep all of the Michigan senators in line. Talk about being a cat herder. There we are. Tanya Schumacher is a cat herder trying to keep our state senators in line. Tanya is running, as I mentioned, running for the Attorney General position, and we welcome her this evening for her to give us some information about her campaign. Also keep in mind, as well as she's doing all of this on a political standpoint, she's been married for 24 years and has 2 wonderful children as well. I'm calling them wonderful. I don't know what she wants to call them on a regular basis, but I'm calling them wonderful. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you. And Teresa does such a great job as your Oakland County Chair, and so it's great to be here with all of you that devote your time and your energy, Marianne, to making the world a better place through great governmental policies. My story is I grew up on a farm and with very civic-minded parents. They believed in the value of hard work, the values that we all share as Republicans. And it's because of that, they were very civic-minded. My dad was always involved in the Republican Party, actually was one of the longest-serving district chairs in the Republican Party's history, I do believe. He served as chair of the 4th District, now it's the 6th District, for about 26 years. So I grew up and I had no choice, but it wasn't until I got out of college and got married. I'm married to a wonderful husband named Steve. We have 2 wonderful children, and I started to see back in 2004, after practicing law for 11 years, that Michigan was hemorrhaging jobs, and I wanted a Michigan that made the world a better place so that my kids, when they graduated from college, would have a place that they could, because the best social program is a job. And I've always believed that. And I wanted jobs for my kids. And unlike the policies of the Granholm administration, that's really what prompted me to run for State House. And I served 6 years in the State House of Representatives after practicing law for 11 years. And then I'm serving for 2 4-year terms in the Michigan Senate, and I was unanimously elected both by Republicans and Democrats to serve as Senate President Pro Tem, which I think is a wonderful honor that my colleagues have bestowed upon me. So what makes us Republicans? I can tell you why I'm a Republican, and that's really to serve on the values that we all consider. I'm pro-life. I've been honored to have received the right to life endorsement for all of my elections that I have run for. And then I have been a lifetime member of the NRA and a defender of the Second Amendment. I've had my CPL license for over 14 years, and very much. And so it's going to be very interesting to hear the comments, because we've had a lot of those discussions in Lansing. But I'm proud to stand by my record standing for the Second Amendment. Also, those in law enforcement that have really, it's so nice to see how Michigan and the country is uniting amongst our law enforcement, unlike how it was. So hats off to our law enforcement, who really should be honored and thanked rather than thrown stones at. And what we saw in also the rule of law, which I give you my pledge that I will be a rule of law attorney general. I won't make decisions from the hip. I will make sure that they are based soundly upon law and our constitutional values. And whether it's cracking down on sanctuary cities or illegal voting, I will make sure that the Attorney General's office is one that you can be proud of. And then also just ensuring that the free market principles are held out. So what does the Attorney General do? I know we've got a representative from the Attorney General, but the Attorney General is a vast majority. I was talking to former Representative Jacobson. The Attorney General has people that go on and represent all the boards. So the Attorney General is really the defender to make sure that the free market is protected, to push back on any federal overreach. And that coupled with dealing with all the different issues that the Attorney General's office, they deal with child support enforcement, property law, they deal with criminal law, making sure that you're helping out the victims, making sure you're solving cold cases. There's 1,100 cold cases between Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb. I really want to tackle that as your next Attorney General. I want to make sure that cybersecurity, that we tackle that. And I think I have the record to defend on it. In my 13 years as a legislator, I have led on issues, some that are very partisan, others that deal with very life-changing, that are very nonpartisan, such as dealing with the opioid epidemic that has destroyed our communities. These are all passions of mine. I also came into the Senate seeing how the Democrats really took the senior protection and elder abuse issues and they politicized it, and that didn't make anyone's lives any better. And I took those issues and really made a great comprehensive senior protection package that were one of the first packages for Governor Snyder to sign when he became a governor. So I think I have the record based upon also coupled with my private practice experience, which some would say, well, you weren't a prosecutor. I think having worked in the private sector, like many of you out there, is actually an advocate for the next Attorney General, because I know what it's like to be in the private sector, to make sure that you don't have government overreach affecting your businesses. I know exactly what that's like. So I would ask for your support of Attorney General. The Attorney General, along with the Secretary of State and the state boards of education, are decided at the convention. So that's where political activism and grassroots 101 gets started. So I would ask that if you do like what I stand for, do like what I have to say. I've got endorsement forms over there. I also have brochures that I think have been passed out, so I would ask for that. I think if there's also one other thing that I'd like to take you to take away tonight, it's that I have never had an easy race. I have always had a dogfight of a race. When I first started running as state rep, President Bush was elected. He didn't win the top of the ticket. I still won as a state representative because of those same values that I learned growing up on a farm. You're tenacious, you're a hard worker, and I won in counties that President Obama won twice, not just once, but twice. So that's quite a headwind. So I'm strong, I'm tough, I will do a good job for you and make the world a better place. The Democrats really want to take the Attorney General's office away from them. The Attorney General deals with so many life-touching issues, so it's important to not only have a strong constitutional conservative that will stand up for what's right, but also one that can win the general election. I think I'm that person. I would ask for your vote, and thank you very much for being here, and everyone in the room for coming out here tonight. Thank you.
Selfishly, as you know, I have a guy that works in the AG's office. What would you change or improve?
So I think Bill Schuette's done a wonderful job as Attorney General, certainly pushing back on federal overreach. I think there's nothing really that I would change what he's doing. I think the issues will change in terms of what we're seeing to make sure that there's free market approach. I think the issue of cybersecurity is going to be the #1 issue facing the next Attorney General. I also would like to, as I mentioned, there's 1,100 unsolved cold cases. I think with combining law enforcement in terms of retired police officers who aren't ready to, and you're probably not retired, so I didn't mean to point to you, but combining retired officers that really want to still give back to their community and help solve these cold cases. One of my very first bills I did was to extend the DNA sunset, and and that's come wonders, and that I guess is probably dating me as how long I've been in the legislature, because DNA is such common practice now. But I really think I'd like to bring justice to the victims. I co-chair the Victims' Rights Caucus in the Bill Van Riggermorter, who actually, believe it or not, is the one that started the Victims' Rights group. He actually gave me the mantle, so I've chaired that for the 13 years. I believe in giving victims a voice and a right. Every year at the state capitol, victims that are crimes, and there's one lady from Oakland County whose daughter disappeared about 14, 15 years ago on 696, and it breaks my heart because they still have not found her daughter. They still have not brought anyone to justice, and I think with the advances of medical and science that you can bring justice to a lot of these families. So I'd like to really focus upon that, and I've got some other ideas, but we can talk offline.
Other questions? Okay. Tanya's going to stick around for a little while, right? And,
Yeah.
she's going to participate in...
Teresa asked me, and I do have analysis of the bills. If anyone wants the analysis, I don't know. I don't mean to overshine the panel up here, but I did bring the legislative analysis that I'm happy to pass out. I don't know if we have enough. I guess, are they up there, Sam? We have about 15 of them. Yeah, so,
Right. And
so
I
if you
want
want one, go over there. So,
Okay.
all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Where did you go, Ross? Okay, the state of the state. What's the date? January 23rd is the state of the state for Michigan, for the governor's giving the state of the state address. As in the past, we've hired a bus to take us to the state of the state. We need people to fill the bus. I'm going to let Ross take it from here. Yep, it works.
It works.
And don't hit the microphone.
I won't hit the microphone. Right now, we're costing the ticket prices out of $30 each. We've had some generous donors walk in this evening, so we've had about $400 worth of donations. One of the things we sent the email out, we'll send it out again, and we'll send details to those interested directly. But we'd like to take some college students along and offer them a $10 ticket. So I know there's, I thought I saw a college student over here, and we have some folks that can reach out to them, so let us know. Right now we can take about 32 people on the bus with refreshments. Is that right, Bill? Refreshments take up a couple of seats, so we keep you refreshed, coming and going. We leave here at the north end of the parking lot on the 23rd, Tuesday the 23rd, we'll load up between 12, pull out hopefully by 12:30. We'll get up there, we'll visit Representative Tedder's office, and Riley's office. We'll head out to a couple of parties. We'll make our way to the state capitol, and we'll be in there before 4 o'clock. We have to go through security. We'll go to Representative Leonard's office and spend the time looking at the big screen there, or other offices if you so wish. And then we get done with that, and we'll take part in different parties. Well, again, details will be forthcoming. So we have a heck of a good time. We get back here about 11:30. That is, if we can round you all up at 10:30 when the bus loads up. That's my biggest challenge, is rounding up the cats at 10:30. So everybody has a blast of a time. The ticket price will go down the more donors that we get. And Mr. Tino, I think, has raised his hand to donate right now.
Actually, it was a question.
Oh, okay. What's your question, Jim?
Are you going to have a pole in it for pole dancing?
You know, that's the one thing, there's been a number of people asking, including Mary Ann, and I'll have to confess, we lost the brass dance pole. Right now, if we get more...
That was part of the entertainment.
I know it was.
Teresa's looking for it right now.
Yeah, no, it was all fun and games, so the pictures ended up on Facebook.
It's one of those things, that bus is going to Las Vegas, what happens on the bus stays on the bus.
Exactly.
At any rate, if some of you would like to donate to the cause, that will, I'd like to say, reduce the cost of the bus ride, hopefully open it up to some college students, and offer a fun day for a lot of our folks here. It's been a tradition. We've been going on since 2011, I think, that bus has been going up there. So see us. Teresa has a sign-up sheet. I think there's 10 or 11 seats left right now. So if you're interested, sign up tonight because those seats will go quickly. College students, make your phone calls tonight and let us know. My contact information is there, also on the emails that have been sent out to you. Is there any questions that I can answer for you? Otherwise, we'll move on.
Mr. Tatter, did you have anything to add?
No, we just, Rep. Riley and I look forward to having you guys come up and join us for this annual event. I'm pleased to offer $100 to help offset the cost of the bus, and look forward to having you up very soon.
Great, thank you. Mr. Riley, where's Jim? Or John?
What's that? Yeah.
Are you ready for us?
Yes, I am. And I'll also be with Jim. I'll do $100 towards it. So.
Moving on.
Okay.
Actually, let's give Mary Ann the credit for that, and Joe Kent as well. They're four donors right now, and I'm still working on Gino here. We'll see what happens.
We get to Gino, but we have another state rep in the house.
All right.
Hello, we have another state rep in the house.
Where's the other state rep?
All right, so if Gino gives 100, I'll give
Brady.
100 to cover the cost of the bus, too.
All right.
No, here's what, let me reword that. My lovely chair here didn't word it correctly. We will donate up to $200, $100 from her, $100 for us, for those people willing to kick in a $10 donation. So we'll do it matching. I've always done matching.
Yes, you have.
So, okay, who's going to be the first one to kick in $10, Jay? All right. Okay, we got 10. Do I see 20? Who's going to do 20?
Get their
20.
pictures, wait, please.
Do I see 30? Who's got 30? This is 30. It's only going to cost me $30? 30?
Jim, I'm not going to Jim. I'll also kick in there.
Okay, 40.
Okay, I'll go 10. Another
50.
Let's go on.
Who's got 60?
5 more.
Come on.
I will give a $50 bill towards the trip.
Done. Let's move on.
Okay,
Thank
there
you
we
very
go.
much.
Here's my 100.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Joe. Okay. Awfully quiet at that table over there. I tried. All right. Okay, we're going to move on, if we will. It's I did have a big long quote that I was going to read that actually Lieutenant Toss sent over. It's a story that came from a book called On Sheep Wolves and Sheepdogs. And if you want to take a chance to read it, it's on the website, but it's actually a very good little excerpt that I had to read, but it's a little long, so we're going to move on, but it's there. And basically what it talks about is the people are generally sheep. The evil people out there are generally wolves, and those that protect the sheep are the sheepdogs. And they're saying that more and more people in the United States are becoming sheepdogs. And we're becoming sheepdogs by way of being able to protect ourselves. And we have some laws that will legislate how we do that, how we can protect ourselves. So we're going to go over a little bit of that tonight. So let me explain to you who we have here on our panel to actually go over that. So I don't think anybody needs any introduction other than Mike Getz, because he's been part of this group for a long time. A resident of Lake Orion, a firefighter of Lake Orion. He's the senior ADA, which does not stand for Disabilities Act. But more importantly, he's been a member of GOGOP for a very long time.
It doesn't stand for American Dental Association.
Yeah, no, it doesn't stand for that one either. He always has some really great, awesome stories to tell. But he's had a chance to look at the bill, so he's going to discuss the legal interpretation and explain where this is going to affect us, where it's not going to change for CPL holders and all those concerned. And then we'll discuss a lot of other aspects of the bill. Suzanne, I'm not even going to try to say your last name. I had it in my mind, and then you said your name, and I thought it's not even close. But Suzanne's an attorney. She's working to develop and strengthen the NRA policies and legislative activities at the state level through implementation of NRA ILA programs in support of the Second Amendment. She coordinates and conducts workshops and represents the association at various public and educational forums. Most recently, she spoke to a group of college Republicans at Hillsdale College. And in looking over what she had discussed at that forum, I found a quote I found that was very telling. And she said, one of the things we're dealing with right now is we don't understand terms. We don't understand how firearms work. Politicians have absolutely no clue. And the problem is you have people without a clue how firearms work making the laws for us. It's pretty telling. She's an NRA instructor herself, an avid shooter, hunter, a lifetime member of the National Rifle Association, and she's been an employee with the NRA since 2005. Next to her we have Chief Dan Roberts for Franklin Village Police Department. He grew up in Franklin, actually. He was a patrolman for Franklin. And then, I guess other things called him away. He went to Quantico. He was an FBI officer for 24 years. Most recently serving as the Assistant Director over the Criminal Justice Information Services Division. So he's had a lot of leadership positions he's held with the FBI. One assignment included serving as a special agent in charge of the Detroit Division of the FBI from 2004 to 2007. So that meant that he had oversight for all FBI investigations throughout Michigan. In addition, he was also an assistant special agent in charge of the FBI's Salt Lake City Division during the 2002 Winter Olympic Games. So he comes to us with a lot of expertise in some great areas that we're going to have tonight, discuss tonight. So he's worked in 8 different states, I believe it was, with the FBI, but he still calls Franklin home. So when he called home after retiring from the FBI, he decided he wasn't ready to retire all the way, so now he's the police chief of Franklin. Somebody asked him tonight when he was going to retire, and he said, when I stop having fun. Next to him is Lieutenant Dan Toth. We're all pretty familiar with Lieutenant Toth in this room, being that he's the commander of the Lake Orion substation for the Sheriff's Department. 34 years in public safety, beginning with military service, stint in the Army military, in the Criminals Investigator Division assigned to the Department of Defense. He moved to the Sheriff's Department, served in many capacities until he ended up as commander right here in Lake Orion. We really appreciate that he's here, but what a lot of you may not realize is that he just recently graduated from the FBI National Academy's professional course for U.S. and international leaders in advanced technologies. It's quite a mouthful, but it's a very special honor because only 1% of police officers across the nation are invited to take part. So we're very lucky to have him and have that recognition. So we're going to start right away with Mike Getz, and he's going to kind of go over the bills that we're talking about, and I'm sure he's going to add his Mike Getz flair. There is a handheld, but for filming purposes, I'd like for you to stand at the podium, whichever one you want to use. Just stand at the podium so we can get you on film.
Well, this is the one that Jim Tedder provided, so see if it stops working when I start talking. Mary Ann asked me to take a look at a couple of proposed bills that were making their way through the Senate and the House. The Senate bill, which has passed the Senate, is Bill 584. It was passed November 8, 2017. And then the House version, House Bill 4417, was passed June 7, 2017. So it's my understanding, since the House passed the House bill and the Senate passed the Senate bill, it's now time to play nice and exchange to the opposite houses for their review and hopefully recommendation that it be passed. I'm going to tell you this right now, that there are people in this room that are a lot more learned about these particular bills than I. What I would suggest doing is taking advantage of a ton of Shoemaker's having brought the legislative analysis, take a peek at it, take a look at it. But Jim Tedder, Mike McCready are probably a lot more well-versed in their particular house's language. One of the bills is 29 pages long, and and one of the bills is 18 pages long. Now, I could stand up here and start reading it to you, but something tells me that I would hear a room full of snores. So I'm going to just kind of take a couple of notes that I jotted down that I thought were of particular interest as far as the concealed weapons statute. Now, the one thing that you have to realize is that these are amendatory acts. These are not brand new legislation. They are more or less taking the existing law, tweaking it in hopes of being able to accomplish what the legislature and what the Senate is attempting to do. There's a lot of verbiage, shalls turned into musts, and language that we really don't need to concern ourselves with. There's some deletions that really don't affect the mechanics, but there are a couple things that I took note and I just wanted to share with you. First of all, Senate Bill 584 is an act to regulate and license the selling, purchasing, and carrying of certain firearms. Now, I think it's interesting to note, and I'm not sure if it was in the House bill version or the Senate bill version, where instead of using the term concealed pistol, which has been the term for many years, they're now using the term firearm, an all-encompassing definition. The first thing that I sought was the fact that there is a procedure for obtaining a concealed pistols license. And essentially, you have to be 21 years of age, you have to be a resident of the state of Michigan. I'm going to find it here real quick. And I'm only bringing this up because it touches on a couple of other points that I want to make. You have to be a resident of the state for 6 months. That will be waived in the case of an emergency application for a concealed pistol license. What is a legal resident? Somebody that's got a valid driver's license or personal identification card, lawfully registered to vote, active duty stationed in the state, or whose home residence is here in the state of Michigan. But when we're talking about PPOs and an emergency license, before it was you had to go to the gun board and make an application to say that, hey, there are certain circumstances that are going on right now that I need an emergency permit. Well, under the statute here, as far as the emergency license is concerned, if you obtain a personal protection order, you are eligible to go in and have an emergency CPL license granted to you. Another way is also to have the sheriff, by what's called clear and convincing evidence, that is presented that the person who is seeking the license and or their family are in danger of immediate or irreparable harm, essentially. It's good for 45 days. However, within 10 days, you must complete the training that you would have taken for a regular CPL license. Now, the interesting parts here that I think are worth noting are in relation to the weapon-free zones. And I'm just going to touch on that just briefly. As far as the concealed pistol license are concerned, you can get your CPL, but there's, by statute, certain areas that you cannot take that particular firearm into. Now, when I'm indicating these changes that are taking place in these two bills, you have to remember that this is not law yet. Okay, these are the proposed laws that ultimately the House and the Senate would like to see passed. And I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm just going to indicate that you shall not carry a concealed pistol on the premises of any of the following: a school or school property, with the exception of a parent or guardian who's dropping their kid off at school, can have a firearm on their person only while dropping off or picking up that child. Public or private child care center, a sports arena, stadium, bar, tavern, licensed under the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, which I'm sure Mr. Brad Jacobson could elaborate more on. Any property or facility owned or operated by a church, synagogue, or mosque, temple, that can be waived by the leader of that particular denomination, church, synagogue. They can say that, yes, you can bring it in. Entertainment facilities with 2,500 or more individuals, where the individual should know or have reason to believe the seating capacity is over 2,500. A hospital, a dormitory. And under the House Bill 4417, they want to add the language of any property owned by a public airport authority, which I think is absolutely a good idea because we don't need anybody taking guns into our airports as it has been seen in recent years. Getting back to the House Bill, CPL holder must have in their possession a license and a valid driver's license and or personal identification card when carrying their firearm. As I indicated, they changed carrying a concealed pistol to carrying a concealed firearm. Now here's one of the parts of the amendments that I really kind of had to take pause on because I don't know that I necessarily agree with it. And that is, as the state of the law is right now, if you're pulled over by a peace officer or any type of traffic infraction, you are required to immediately notify that peace officer that you have a CPL and that firearm is in the vehicle. Upon the new amended language, it indicates upon request of a peace officer, shall disclose that they are carrying concealed firearm or portable device. When I say portable device, I'm essentially talking about a taser. And what that does is it's now taking the onus off of the individual who's carrying the CPL, or the firearm in their vehicle, and now placing it on the officer. So they're, according to this amended language, if it were to pass, it would not be up to the person to have to notify the officer. It would have to be up to the police officer to make an affirmative request and ask whether or not they would be eligible. And speaking with the chief of Franklin, he indicated to me that it used to be that you could run a driver's license. There was a CPL that was associated with that license, and you could pretty well tell whether or not that person had a CPL. So it was it was a safety aspect from the patrol officer who's walking up to a car. They don't know who it is. They don't know what the circumstances are surrounding, other than they know that a traffic violation has occurred and they're going to make a stop. And it was to put at ease the officers. Now, the officers cannot run on their in-car computers, and it will not come up whether or not. So it's going to be incumbent on the officers, if this passes, to make an affirmative request of these individuals. So they're going to be going in a little bit blind. When I talk about the exception to the weapon-free zone, essentially, up to this point in time, the only exceptions really apply to police officers and retired police officers, corrections officers, retired corrections officers, private investigators, bail agents, state court judges. Nowhere will you ever see a prosecutor's name listed in that. Just have you know. But that's okay, we're expendable. But the law as proposed would give people an opportunity to, I guess, earn their way with an exemption from those CPL free zones. And the way about doing that is they would have to take at least 8 hours of additional training, which would include classroom and range time. You would have to fire no fewer than 94 additional rounds. I'm not sure exactly how they arrived at that even number. For training, you would have to take training from a certified or registered either NRA or firearms instructor. And basically, if I understand this correctly, if you comply with all these terms, you can petition to have an exemption put on your CPL that would allow you into CPL free zones. I keep saying CPL free zones, but back in the day when this all came about, and I'm so old, we just used to call it a CCW. And it rolled off the tongue a lot easier that way. So I mean that's something that in theory you could be deleting the CCW free zone. It's funny, I was talking to Lieutenant Toth and the Chief of Franklin, and there seemed to be a consensus, though, that the real problems out there are not necessarily with valid CPL holders violating the provisions of the statutes. And that's one of the things that I think, you know, some legislators, who I'm assuming are not in this room, but in other areas, don't seem to understand is that when we talk about the Second Amendment, we're talking about regulating people who want to follow the rules, the people that go out and they do it by the book. You know, if we take away their rights, then at least one segment of society that's not going to follow the rules, and we're going to be at their behest. So I'm not an expert on this topic by any means. I hope that some of the panelists that are seated to my left can maybe clarify. If I misspoke, I apologize. If you have any questions, I'll be free to answer them.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the invitation to join you guys tonight. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I cover a lot of the federal side of things, but this ties in because I want to talk about national concealed carry reciprocity, and then I'll get to NRA's really big targets here in Michigan. So I'm going to start by talking about national concealed carry reciprocity. Has everybody heard of this bill? Yes? Yes. All right, good deal. So I want to talk about this because I think it's important to explain kind of where we're at, where we're going, why this bill is so important to the NRA, and why it's going to be the most important federal thing we do probably in modern American history. This bill by far is the largest expansion of our self-defense rights in modern American history. This is 30 years culmination of expanding right to carry in general across the country. 30 years ago, we didn't have even half of the states that had right to carry whatsoever, and now we're at a spot where all 50 states have some form of right to carry in their states. So this is really a huge effort for us to eliminate the confusing patchwork of laws that exist as you travel state to state with your CCW or your CPL. I work kind of nationwide, so I go back and forth with those terms, but this is so important because what's happened here is that you have folks who are law-abiding citizens who are traveling and they're becoming ensnared because the laws are confusing as they travel state to state. And these are folks that want to follow the law, just like you heard. They want to be law-abiding citizens, and they're getting arrested because they have lawfully owned firearms, they have followed the laws of their state and received a permit, but they've gone into states of which don't have the same reciprocity, and they've been arrested for that. So this is a huge culmination for folks who travel while they're carrying. And our bottom line truly is that you don't check your right to self-defense when you leave one state and go into another. Our bottom line essentially is that you have that human right to self-defense. Outside of your constitutionally protected Second Amendment rights, you were born with the right to defend yourself as a human being. And so we also believe that here you have folks who have driver's license that you get in your state, and as you cross a border, it's full faith and credit, and they're recognized. Well, why not your CPL or your CCW? And don't forget that driving a car is a privilege, human right to self-defense, and a constitutional fundamental right to Second Amendment rights. And so that's why this is so important to us, and we've been trying so hard to get this passed for so long now. So while this federal bill will indeed allow you to travel state to state with your state CPL or CCW, I think it's really important to point out the states' rights issues. There's been a lot of misinformation out there, even within our own ranks, about how will this work. Folks are concerned about state laws and how will law enforcement be able to do their job, or the Michigan State Police with the issuing of permits. Really important to note that this will not change anything at the state level. States will retain complete control over the issuance of permits, the revocation of permits, the enforcement of permits, and how they work. Law enforcement will operate exactly the same, full force of law, if there are any criminal aspects with a firearm as well. Private property owners, nothing will change with them. You will still have discretion on your property on how you want to deal with firearms. So that's important to note because there's just been so much misinformation out there about this bill, particularly in this regard. Now again, all 50 states have laws, including the District of Columbia now, which is very rare and which was a rare feat and very new. But all 42 states plus DC have a shall issue permitting process. So that means that the state shall issue you a permit unless they can prove that you are a prohibited person, either to have a firearm or to get a permit.
8 of those states are considered may issue, and those are the big problems we have, where it's sort of like, well, we might issue if we feel like it, if you can prove that you are so important to deserve one, or that you can prove you have a necessity to defend yourselves. And as you can imagine, we find that to be ludicrous. And so this is sort of the pinnacle for right to carry across the country. But the reason I bring this up is that there's a lot of scare tactics and propaganda about this bill, and oh no, they're going to allow people to carry guns state to state. Well, we've been doing it for quite some time now. This is no different. Again, all 50 states have a way, including the District of Columbia, have a way for their citizens to get a permit. Unfortunately, that confusing patchwork of laws is taking away, especially resources and time from law enforcement that are forced to enforce these. And of course, they have to do their job. But the problem is, as you can imagine, none of those laws have anything to do with reducing violent crime. So we're kind of left wondering, here we are enforcing so many laws, and actually I always bring my tools of the trade with me. These are all of the federal, state, and ATF laws on the books. There are tens of thousands of them if you want to look at these, but there are so many laws on the books already, and here we are sort of wasting time with folks who have lawfully owned firearms and received their CPLs and CCWs. So this is why this is a major priority at the federal level for the NRA. So I want to kind of bring this up, and I know we have a candidate here, and I know she would have joined on as well, but important to mention that the Attorney General is the top law enforcement agent of your state. And we've had the support of 24 of them that have actually supported this, and that's pretty monumental when they go above and beyond to support a bill, something so important like this. We work very closely with law enforcement. We have an entire law enforcement division at NRA, and we work with them on this as well. So we were proud to get the support of 24 state attorneys general on this particular bill.
How many are Republican, how many Democrat?
You know, off the top of my head, I don't know, but I can tell you it's always usually a party split. We may have 1 or 2 that were Democrats. So.
Was Michigan one of the ones?
Indeed it was. So did you have something to add?
I just wanted to say I put in a resolution in the Senate to support this.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, very important positions, I'll tell you, a lot of times go unnoticed when it comes to the Second Amendment. Reciprocity agreements often come through attorneys general, not legislatures. So often, a lot of the attorneys general in our country are unsung heroes of the Second Amendment that do a lot for us, but don't get the credit sometimes for some things like reciprocity agreements, because that's how the state constitution allows that to happen. Just to kind of give you an idea, last year the number of concealed carry permits grew by a record 1.83 million. So there are more than 16.36 million permit holders in the country today. Trust me, if we were the problem, you would know we were the problem. And that doesn't account for the fact that there are, over 100 million gun owners that own over 400 million firearms. We're going to talk a little bit about the Knicks. Chief Roberts is going to address that, but since the invention of Knicks, there's been well over 260 million Knicks checks in this country. But to kind of give you an idea, in 10 states, more than 10% of the adult population has concealed carry permits. Michigan's not in the top 10, but I do have the numbers. Michigan's at 8.6%. So as of last month, there are 619,433 CPL holders in the state of Michigan. So we've come a long way on that. But I tell you that because kind of one of the biggest things we talk about is that we're law-abiding, and it's been proven over and over again that gun owners and CPL holders are far more law-abiding part of the citizenry than other segments of the citizenry. This is the compelling statistics between 2007 and 15. The number of concealed carry permits went up 215%. During that same time, the murder rate dropped 14%, and the violent crime rate dropped by 21%. Now, to be clear, I am not saying that correlation is causation. I don't know why. I'm not a criminologist. I don't know why that happened. But what I can tell you is that it didn't happen because there were more guns and more permit holders. So the more times people try to tell you there are too many guns and too many people are carrying firearms, I can tell you that statistically that that's not the truth. FBI crime stats are pretty easy to look up and read through, and if you're interested, this is generally where we get that stuff, and also from some of the statistics that are studies that are done. So where are we at with this? Happily, December 6th, H.R. 38 passed the House in a bipartisan vote, as you can see, 231 to 198. So now we're on to the Senate. That is going to be a huge uphill battle. As you can imagine, we are going to need 60 votes to get that in the Senate. Now, all is not lost. This particular bill in the Senate was run by John Cornyn, Senator Cornyn, who's also a current sponsor of a companion bill in the Senate for this. He was able, in 2013, he was able to get 13 Democrats to sign on to this bill. Currently, 7 of those same Democrats are currently senators. 5 of them are up for re-election. So if anyone's wondering where NRA is going to be focusing our attention, just take a guess. But yeah, so 5 of them are up for re-election, and so we don't expect to have a vote on this probably until the spring. But I will tell you this, it is going to be a battle. Michael Bloomberg has pledged $25 million just against this bill alone. So it's going to be a heck of a fight, but we can do it. We're going to work hard to do it. We're going to focus on what we need to. Our members are the best grassroots folks out there, so that's where NRA is going to definitely be focusing its attention. Now, another part of this bill that's really important is called the Fix Knicks. And I'm not going to touch on that because we have an absolute expert on the Knicks system here, in Chief Roberts, who is going to address the Knicks part of this bill. And whether or not that will make it to the companion in the Senate, I don't know. But that's going to be a pretty integral part of H.R. 38, of which NRA definitely supported. So, and then very briefly, because I know you guys are here about state stuff, I just want to kind of break down what NRA is going to be focusing on Michigan. This is going to be our priorities. I'm sure our lobbyists, we have a new one, his name is Scott Jones. He's a Virginia guy who's just getting used to the cold weather. He got stuck here because the engine wouldn't start in Lansing because it froze. And he's about a 6'7" former fullback for James Madison University. So he sat on a tiny little plane for 5 hours to get back to DC. But he's going to be the guy in Lansing. He's really getting to know everybody and working with our former guy, Art Tom, on these. But here are the 4, just to kind of give you an idea of what we're working on. Of course, elimination of pistol-free zones. These are imaginary thresholds of which it is decided that you no longer have the right to protect yourself. We understand that sometimes it's a paradigm shift in thinking for people to think about guns in certain places that they haven't been allowed in a very long time. But when you think a little bit deeper about it, it doesn't make sense to, when you're doing nothing to make sure criminals don't bring guns in, but you don't let the folks with CPLs bring those in. Elimination of pistol registration. Michigan is one of only 6 states that do this. I moved back, I was in DC for 12 years. Well, I lived in Alexandria, so I could have all of my guns. I have many, and I moved back and I thought, I have to register all of these. It was unbelievable. So we are looking to elimination pistol registration. Again, so Michigan is not one of 6. Provisional carry permits, that's for 18 to 20-year-olds. You will hear about this bill if you haven't already. What's interesting is you have 18, 19, 20-year-olds who serve in our nation's military. They're law enforcement officers. They have security jobs of which they're trained with firearms and so on. And what's interesting about Michigan is it actually recognizes provisional permits from all other states, but does not have a mechanism for Michiganders to have that same opportunity. So provisional permits, and then the foster care bill. This is largely born out of a lawsuit of which they were considering the firearm ownership of foster care parents and basically making them choose between their ability to defend themselves and in the Second Amendment to be able to foster a child. And so this bill is really important because it would ensure that these folks aren't stripped of their rights, that their gun ownership isn't considered, and that essentially, just to kind of read word for word, is that it allows foster parents to possess on their person or store their guns or ammunition in a locked container. So that is going to be a bill that our folks in the ILA stateside are going to be working on quite a bit. So those are our priorities for that. I'm going to leave this up for some there was one more slide, but there are some resources for some websites to get information. But if you are interested in what we're working on here in Michigan, nraila.org. All of the fact sheets, all of the legislative alerts, both federal and state, can be found there. I will stick around tonight if you have any questions about what NRA is doing here in Michigan. I am thrilled to be back here in Michigan after a long hiatus in Washington, D.C. So thank you all so much.
Hello again, everyone. Like Suzanne, I also escaped from Washington, D.C. on 3 separate occasions. I lived, unfortunately, in the Beltway area for quite a number of years, thanks to my employment with the FBI. What I'd like to do, if you don't mind, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the Knicks system. As she mentioned, The NICS, for those of you that don't know, is the National Instant Check System. That is, when you go to Dick's Sporting Goods or Dunham's or Walmart or anywhere and purchase a gun, that check will go through NICS in the FBI in DC. And that is done about 30 million times a year now. I think it just reached the threshold of about 30 million times a year. As you might have mentioned, it's a difficult task for the FBI to handle because of that volume. And actually, it's not because of the actual transactions of purchasing the guns and doing the checks. It's because of the computer programs that it takes to wipe out all of those transactions every night. Because by the Brady Act, all of the information, if you went to Dick's Sporting Goods last night and you purchased a gun, by 24 hours later, that information has to be deleted from the system by law. And that is the hardest part that the computer geeks tell me, is getting all of that database cleaned up. And that is one of the things that is also very expensive. Anybody here get a firearm for Christmas, purchase one, or get one as a gift? Well, I guess I'm the only one that did. So Black Friday on this year, the day after Thanksgiving, a record was set. The Knicks System did 203,000 firearms checks in one day. And that's nationally. The nice part about that is that 90% of them, there is an instant return to the firearms dealer saying that they can proceed or not proceed. But there's a mostly 90% they can proceed with those transactions. Very few of them are actually delayed on that. So it's really a good news story there. The bad news story about NICS, and she mentioned that there are some bills pending in Washington to try and fix some of this. And I'm going to be very honest with you. There are some huge gaps in the NICS system, mostly as they relate to mental health records. And this is largely because, and as maybe the politicians in this room know, that mental health record issue is a too hard thing to fix because nobody wants to tackle it. We have certain states out there. Let me give you an example. I pulled some of these just so I had it accurately. From Michigan, there's about 150,000 mental health records in there, meaning there's about 150,000 individuals that Michigan has identified that they should not be able to purchase a gun because they have mental health issues. There are states out there, I circled one, Montana has 23 in the system. There's others there that have 3 and 4 and 5. There are issues with these individuals that clearly, because of their mental health, should not be allowed to purchase a firearm. That is something that has to be fixed in the future. I know that Congress is looking at it. The difficulty there is, where do you draw the line between somebody who has a very mild form of depression and somebody that clearly should not be allowed to get a firearm because they have a mental illness? The line there has normally been drawn that they have been adjudicated as mentally ill. They have been involuntarily committed to some sort of mental institution, but that's not always the case. There is a patchwork of every state addresses that differently, and that's something that we hope in the near future that NICS will fix. But it's going to take a lot of effort just to try and decide what is mental illness and what should throw somebody out of the box for purchasing a gun. The ATF form that you fill out, a lot of times it's done on the computer now. If you go to purchase a firearm, it's the ATF form 4473. It's kind of a joke because it asks you, are you mentally ill? yeah, but I'm going to put no here. And the other part of it is a joke is, do you abuse drugs? And so you're never going to put yes and push yourself out of the box. So there are some things that could be done to improve NICS. There is a huge volume, as she said, and it goes very well for the most part, but there are some areas of that needs to be fixed. We know from Sandy Hook, we know from the Virginia Tech shooting, all of those mass shootings involved individuals that had significant mental health concerns, and they should have never had access to a firearm, and that's one of the things that we do need to fix there. I'm going to talk now about the pending legislation a little bit and maybe how it affects local law enforcement. We have a lot of discussion about this here in Oakland County at the chiefs meetings. All of the Oakland County police chiefs meet monthly, and largely Sheriff Bouchard or his representative is there as well. And we talk about major bills that are pending before the state legislature. One of the things that does concern most of the police chiefs in the room when we meet is the pistol-free zone portion of it, specifically as it relates to schools. And as you might imagine, I know that the superintendent of the school district where I am the police chief, there's Birmingham schools there, he's very concerned about that this bill is going to pass and that people that are CPL holders are going to be allowed into the school. As it stands now, they are not. They are part of the pistol-free zones that Mike talked about before. The other pistol-free zones, you know, bars, stadiums, I forget some of the other ones, not so much a concern there among law enforcement. What the really concern is the schools. And do you really want concealed pistols license being carrying in the schools when given the fact that the climate in all of the mass shootings that we've had? It's more of an optics thing than anything, because obviously we all know that CPL holders are probably some of the cleanest people on earth. They've been through the background checks and they've got that. But how do the teachers, how do the students know, you know, who is a good guy and who is a bad guy inside the schools? And it's a very difficult thing, and I think that's where most of the pushback from the law enforcement side of the house is going to be on any of these bills that are pending there. Not do I think that, I know that that's where the pushback is going to be, is strictly with the pistol-free zones involving the school. You know, certified police officers working in schools to protect our students that are there, that would be great. But let's be realistic, the school districts can't afford them. They can't have them at the front door every day. I would love to see that as an option where the legislatures fund or help the school districts in funding security so that the schools have the proper security. But that's realistically, we all know that can't be in every school just because it's just so expensive. I'm going to let the lieutenant take over the rest of the time as it relates to local law enforcement concerns with some of these. But I do want to say that I am going to be here for the rest of the night, and then after the panel is done, if you want to talk about any of the issues facing the FBI today, as it relates to firearms or not, I'd be happy to talk about that. There are things that I watch in the news every night that make me sick to my stomach about what's being said about the FBI. Most of it is rubbish. I can tell you firsthand that most of it is rubbish. There are some things that clearly they didn't get right when they are talking about all of these investigations that are going on. But I can tell you for a fact, and this is one thing that I will go to my grave saying, is I worked directly for Director Mueller, and every day for 2.5 years I was in his office at 7:30 in the morning for a briefing every morning. He is a man of integrity. He is a patriot. He has been shot for this country. He was a Marine in Vietnam, did 2 tours in Vietnam. He works harder than anybody you can imagine. He is in at 6 in the morning. He works until 9, 10 at night. He is smart and hardworking. He is also never going to win any awards for being the nicest guy in the world, and actually he's kind of a prick. Not kind of, he is. But he is also, because people ask me this all of the time. They ask me because he's getting so much attention right now. You know, he allows himself to be driven only by the law. He could care less about any of the politics. You know, and I sit there and maybe like a lot of you, I sit there and I have Fox News and I have CNN right next to each other on my clicker, and so I'm going back and forth, and they're completely opposite, you know, and they're talking about different things. I will say this, he doesn't care about anything that's on Fox or anything that's on CNN or MSNBC about him. He is strictly focused like a laser beam on this investigation. So I just wanted to get that out there because I do know the man. I worked for him directly for 2.5 years, and then, well, longer than that, but right with him for 2.5 years. And I think he's going to get things done there the right way, and there will be charges if there need to be, and there won't be if there doesn't need to be. So if you want to talk about that afterwards, I'm happy to talk about that as well. So
why do you think you gave Hillary a pass on everything before you leave?
So he did not. That was Director Comey that followed Director Mueller.
What about Comey?
Yeah. Now Comey, also know him fairly well, not nearly as well as Director Mueller. I had a chance to be in a room with at the time I had been retired, a bunch of former FBI executives, and he had just made the decision and had done his press release about the Hillary investigation. He's very comfortable with his decision-making process on that. It's a style difference that a lot of us in the FBI are not used to. They're more used to the Louis Freeh, Director Mueller style, where you don't get out in front of the media a lot, if at all. In fact, Director Mueller hates the media. He didn't ever wanted to talk to them and didn't enjoy it. Director Comey absolutely enjoyed being in front of the media. He enjoyed the interaction. He enjoyed being questioned about his investigations. He didn't take it personally. He just enjoys that kind of back and forth. He believes to this day, and I'm sure of it, that he believes he made all of the correct decisions there. There are those of us that are in the FBI that have real heartburn with how he did that, some of the things he did, especially as it relates to leaking his memorandum to a third-party attorney and then getting that, when he could have clearly just taken it to one of the committees on the Hill and given it to them directly. You know, there's a lot of us that have concerns about that, but yeah, I was not involved in that investigation at all, so I wasn't there for the nuts and bolts of it. I do know a lot of friends that were agents that did work on it, and they all unanimously came to that conclusion. This was not something that he decided on his own without input from all of the staff and all of the other agents and analysts that were assigned to that. So I'm comfortable with that. Now, you can criticize his style and how he did it, and a lot of us do. But in terms of
$147 million in contributions to the Clinton Foundation by people who bought the uranium rights didn't buy any favors, in your opinion.
Okay, we're gonna
So let's talk afterwards.
yeah, this is a discussion for after.
We'd love to talk to you
We're doing that, yes.
All
And actually, it sounds like we may even have another full meeting with that.
Well, I do have a confession to make. I did get a new rifle for Christmas. It's a 308. But I was chuckling because when I got back, the young retail sales agent, he says, okay, now, you fill it out yourself. And we did get to that section. Are you a terrorist? Abuse, substance abuse, and mental health issues. And so it is a very interesting conversation here tonight. It's a very important one. A lot of ramifications for all of us. We're all in this together when we turn our television sets on and we see all the different types of violence. When I ran into Marianne just after the holiday and she invited me here tonight, we got talking, and I didn't want to get too much into the new legislation, but I did have some, general comments on, firearms, armed safety, and then, our rights, Second Amendment rights. It was 2001 or 2000 when the CPLs, when that actually changed. And we heard a lot of things from a lot of different folks, how, this is really going to upset and change things. And folks, we have not had many issues at all with the CPL holders. I was an instructor for hunter safety with the DNR, snowmobile safety, and some of the other safety courses. And the CPL process has actually helped educate folks. And I have to tell you, I've arranged for some of the CPL courses, or maybe some folks in here that actually attended some of them. And when they came out of the courses, they actually said, you know what, I wanted to get a handgun, and I'm not sure I'm going to carry, but I learned so much in the CPL course, what responsibilities we have, all the responsibilities that go along with this. And that's really mostly what we see out there on the road patrol. We do not get that many issues with CPL holders or folks that have gone through the training, they've taken the time, and they understand the regulations that accompany firearms.
So, I wanted to, point that out. And we're all part of that, how we care for our firearms. I wanted to take a couple minutes tonight to remind everyone, don't leave your firearms in your motor vehicles. We chuckle, but you would be surprised some of the reports. So that we go to great lengths. I mean, all the law enforcement, ex-military, we really appreciate, we understand how far back, firearms go in America here, and we greatly respect that. But not everybody is the same. Common sense sometimes isn't that common, and that's those are some of the issues that in law enforcement. When I look at the evening news, when I'm reviewing our police reports, for the most part, these acts of violence, they're falling in like three categories: domestic violence, substance, some level of substance abuse, or mental health issues. And mental health issues and substance abuse has really increased in the last 8 or 10 years, and it's really hard. I understand our elected officials, it's not easy drafting this legislation and having that crystal ball, but certainly consider your friends in law enforcement and what the police officers are out there doing day in and day out when they're summoned to the next home or the next vehicle stop. Consider some of these public safety jobs that we do have when we're drafting the legislation. But overall, we really have, we actually prosecute very few folks for any violation of the CPL. It's just not that often. And in fact, accidental firearms with all the, how many, Dan, you said how many firearms were purchased?
30 million last year.
Last year, the accidental firearm injuries and deaths keep going down because people are becoming better educated in how to care for them. And somebody spoke to that. It's, a lot of it is just education with the NRA. So I know it's getting late here, and that's, Mary Ann, that's all that I have, unless someone has some questions in the audience.
So good questions, yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Are there any statistics, excuse me, on how many members, what percentage of members from the NRA get in trouble?
I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll pass it down.
Actually, it's funny, tonight I was reading a study just on that. John Lott is a criminologist, statistician who and he uses FBI data, Department of Justice. He did a study just on that, and they found that in the segment of society that CPL holders are far more law-abiding beyond even, and I hate to say even beyond police officers, that the numbers were pretty significant. I have that study, so afterwards, if you'd like, I can give that link to folks, but the numbers are compelling based on that data, and it's such a minuscule, tiny fraction of people that run afoul or commit crimes with a CPL. So I can actually share that with you, but it's John Lott who just recently did a study on that particular subject.
Ross?
I could probably keep you here all night with questions about Second Amendment and rights and so forth. But one I would like to direct to the legislative people, a fine point, and that is who can determine in our society who is mentally incompetent or has a problem and should be put on the banned list. Right. Because one of the things that goes on, and if you probably most of the people here are not aware of the fact that even your pediatrician, the medical profession, many which attacked me as a elector. So I have thousands of emails and so forth from these folks, and there's a gigantic campaign across the nation being led in California. That gentleman right over there can tell you about it. But I'm concerned, are the fine points in there as to who and how can put your name on the banned list? So I think it's way too easy. And how many people here were not aware that those questions are being asked of your little children when they go to the pediatric offices or any other doctor's office? Were you aware of that?
Wow.
So anyway.
That was part of my remarks, is that it's very difficult, and as you can see, if you look at the
the published statistics from Knicks, there are states that don't enter hardly anybody as being mentally deficient. If you've got states like New Hampshire that have 10 people in there that are in the Knicks database that have mental illness that shouldn't be getting guns, you know that the state of New Hampshire has a lot more than 10 or 11 people, when Michigan has 135,000. And so the question becomes, how do you draw that line, or where do you draw that line? In Michigan, it's you had to have been adjudicated as mentally deficient, meaning you had to have a doctor tell you that, a judge tell you that, or you had to have been involuntarily committed. And those of us in law enforcement do involuntarily committals, unfortunately, way too often. Meaning a police officer shows up at a house, usually it's during a domestic situation, and one person there says, I either want to kill myself or I want to kill somebody else. And if we get those magic words, they're going to get evaluated, and they're going to be taken to the hospital for mental evaluation. Those people should be taken out of the box for being able to purchase a firearm, and in Michigan they are. But the problem we have is that there are states that don't address it at all. They just ignore it as not being a problem. So it's a widespread problem that we need to fix nationally. Fix Knicks is a Washington, D.C. bill that is trying to take a look at that and fix it.
And just to really add really quick, you mentioned pediatrics, doctors asking questions. There is a series of lawsuits called Docs versus Glocks, is actually the lawsuit that the NRA has actually forefronted to make sure that when you go into a doctor's office, they don't ask you those questions, because why would that have anything to do with your treatment as a patient, whether or not you own a firearm? So we're dealing with that, and VAs are asking that question. So we are dealing with that in a legal sense from the NRA side.
Good. All right, let's go here.
PL holders, legally, law-abiding people, and for some reason, or actually open carry people, pardon me, that then, in a cold winter night, put on a coat and they're suddenly violating the law and become felons. So the Senate package is really focusing on those otherwise prohibited zones. So they're two different bill packages, and as was suggested earlier, perhaps we can do some horse trading and get both of them over the finish line.
So when GOGOP takes the bus up next week for State of the State, can we talk to our state reps and our state senators about some kind of reconciliation or aid you in this horse trading?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of people in both sides of the dome that are willing to support these packages. So it's really based on the individual and where they stand on these bills. So.
Next question, Jim.
The mental health aspects of this. And it was her feeling that that was a product of Obamacare, that they were the ones who insisted that you ask the question, and that she felt like if she said that she was prescribed an antidepressant for a very short period of time due to, say, postpartum depression or a death in the family, that those people were going to be discriminated against in the future based on getting any kind of permits. Is that any feeling that you have?
Well, Surgeon General actually was pushing to make gun violence a health issue.
Yes.
And so that was one of their big sort of, I guess I'd say, lobbying strategies. Of course, we objected because gun ownership is not a mental affliction or a health policy issue. But they tried to put those together.
But her whole prospect, her whole perspective, on this was the fact that everything you put in a patient's record was now in a national database. And everyone had access to it, and that was her feeling that they were coming at you from the backside because you were being honest with your doctor, and your doctor was forced to report it to the federal government.
We are always concerned with any records when asking questions about gun ownership, which is why we oppose the pistol registration or having to write things down about if you own a firearm. We don't believe that the government needs to have an exhaustive list of who owns what kind, why. So we are always concerned.
But does everyone else on the panel agree with you? Because I do, but I'm not hearing.
Pass the ball.
Well, in terms of Obamacare, I can't comment. I had never heard that before, and I ran the Knicks program for the FBI, so I've never heard of it being an issue. I will say that my own sons, when they were in high school, they were asked, how many guns do you have in your house? of course, I have probably 50 in my house, so and the doctor just wrote it down and went on, and I didn't really think too much of it at the time, but it is something that they ask. I can't answer your Obamacare question. I don't know the answer to that. I guess the database did not receive anything from any Obamacare-like government agency to put into the system.
Doesn't mean it's not there. It's not in there.
The general question, the education establishment, at least people that I know, are very opposed to having guns in the school. On the other hand, it seems to me like incidents like Sandy Hook were soft targets that people invaded with guns and shot the place up because there was nobody to shoot back. And so, in my mind, we ought to have, certainly policemen in the schools, but I wouldn't be opposed. I think that having the superintendent or the school board appoint certain people privately, not publicly, that are appropriately trained, so that they are no longer gun-free zones and no longer soft targets. Do you have any thoughts on the subject?
You're right about the educators. They do not want the CPL holders to carry guns in the schools. I'm glad you mentioned the training aspect of that. I have found over the years, and I've carried a gun every day in my adult life, and I used to be a firearms instructor and a SWAT guy for the FBI. Shooting guns is a perishable skill. I can tell you that firsthand from my own experience. When I was a firearms instructor and I was shooting 3-4 days a month, I was really damn good at it. And now that I'm an administrator largely, and I carry it and I qualify a couple times a year, I'm not nearly as good as I was when I was younger, well, like all of us, I guess. But I'm not nearly as good. And so that's what concerns me, is that I read these bills and they say, oh, you'll be great if you get 8 hours of training and shoot 96 rounds. That's a load of garbage. If you're going to be asked to really defend a school or provide security somewhere, you have to have regular and ongoing training. Just like you shot at lunch every day when you were in DC, you would like to see people that kept their skills up that are in the schools and doing that. And
one thing to add, if you don't mind, the NRA has a program called the School Shield Program, and it was implemented immediately after the Sandy Hook tragedy, and it was based on this alone, that we needed to have a program to specifically train. Training in a civilian situation in a school grounds is incredibly different than any other carry situation you might be involved with. And so we've actually created a grant program so that if schools decide, NRA is not trying to put guns in schools, but if the schools make a decision that they want an armed teacher or an armed police officer, they have to have specialized training for a school situation, children running around, teachers, other people maybe coming in armed. So we have a setup where they actually can come for training. We have grant funding available, and we're trying state by state to get this introduced to make it an option. So something that maybe down the line lawmakers can consider and schools can consider individually.
And the model for that actually may be the airline industry, because pilots after 9/11 wanted to carry guns there, and they got a special training program together, and certain pilots, most of them who are ex-military pilots, went through the program and they carry firearms as long as they keep up with their regular base training on there. So the model could be what the pilots use today.
All right, we've got one more question.
I can attest to the fact that I've spent a lot of time in doctor's offices. I don't hear these questions about whether I've got a gun or not. But the question was about the integrity of people on the NRA. I believe in the current issue of the NRA Freedom Magazine, there's an article about somebody who wanted to prove that the people like you and me were not very good at selling guns over the internet, and they selected 72 people. They gave them various types of backgrounds, and they went out and tried to buy a gun from you people. And none of them were successful because the information was too questionable.
Okay, that's right. To move on, as interesting as this is, and I'm sure we all have a lot of questions, thank you to our panelists. If you'll stick around.
Mike Bishop, incidentally, our congressman got a top A, you forgot that one, I'm not going to get top A rating from the NRA. And the other thing is, if you join the NRA, I can't believe we haven't given them a plug, you'll get daily briefings. You want to know what's going on here, going on in California? You will get daily briefings from it. So please consider joining the NRA. It's really easy, a couple clicks.
Go beyond and ask how many people have a CPL. But probably the same number. All right, so as we move on from here, know that we do have an issue right here in our township that needs some, we need to discuss. And it has to do with guns, it has to do with the responsibilities of gun owners. And it's been a thorn in Chris's side for a little bit. So he's here to address that situation.
Good evening. Chris Barnett, I'm the Township Supervisor. Sorry I'm late. I missed some good stuff, it sounds like. It's my third meeting tonight. So yeah, we do have some interesting things happening in the township as it relates to guns. I do have my CPL permit, and when I decided I wanted to carry, I talked to Lieutenant Toth and said, Dan, what would you do? He hooked me up with Milt. What's Milt's last name? Williams. Milt Williams, who's probably trained thousands of people to get their CPL license and then continuing it for the sheriff's deputies. But one of the things Dan and I talked about, this is unrelated to what I'm going to talk to you about briefly, what's going on in the township as it relates to guns. Today, actually, and over the last couple of weeks, kind of related to this issue, is a proposed legislation in Lansing, and everybody in here is pro-gun, because you're here at the Greater Oakland Republican Club meeting. Yeah. So is Dan, and so am I. I'm not going to speak for Dan. But we recently were ranked the safest community in the state of Michigan, over 30,000, or in Township. It's a very nice thing. It's all testament to the lieutenant's been here for 6 years, and he's done a great job. But that said, if you don't think there are crazy people in our very safe community, you need to read the weekly police report, which has over 300 runs. In our nice, safe community, and it's chock full of crazy people. So I didn't think that the bar was really high when I spent 8 hours on a Saturday at the sheriff's office with about 30 other people learning how to safely handle a gun. I think it's dangerous to consider removing those provisions, and I'm looking at Mr. Tedder, because I think that could actually do more harm than good. Anybody that wants to get a gun can get a gun in the state of Michigan and carry a gun legally. So that's a little bit of a counterpoint to maybe what some of you feel and maybe what some of you heard tonight, but it's something to consider every time that they're going out on a run. You know, these guys have the most dangerous job in the world, in my opinion. They don't know where they're walking and what their situation they're walking into. So I was grateful for the 8 hours of training I got from Milt Williams, and I didn't think that was too big of a hoop to jump through in order to learn how to carry a gun. So that said, in Orion Township, we do not have a left-wing group of conspiracy theorists trying to take our guns from us, like my good friend Ross Ensign accused me of. But we're good now. He didn't accuse me of that, and if you know me, I use sarcasm all the time, and I poke fun, so Ross, don't get mad at me. But we do have, you're admitting it now? Oh, he's admitting it now, okay. He did say that. But what we do have is we have a group of people who live in Orion Township, who live in a neighborhood who've had bullets leave neighboring properties and come onto their properties. And ironically, in 2001, I moved on to Roxbury Court, which is off Silverbell. And the week I moved in, it was January, because that's the same time my youngest daughter was born. My next door neighbor's house had a bullet go in their dining room window from the property behind us. And they didn't realize they were gone. They came home, their dining room window was broken, and then they looked and they saw there was a bullet lodged up in a stud in the upper corner of their dining room. So we called the sheriff's office, and they came out and handled the situation. So just this past summer, Hills of Indianwood, which is off of Baldwin Road, had the same situation happen. So these residents, homeowners associations can be very organized when they want to be. They got organized and they started emailing and calling Lieutenant Toth and myself daily, basically. Anybody know how far does a 9mm bullet travel? I didn't know, but I figured I Googled it.
No, in excess of 2 miles. No, way beyond.
No, well, depending on where you look, 6,000 feet or so, so it's more than a mile. 30-6, 3 miles. 3 miles. So we have a lot of big lots in Orion Township. We have a lot of subdivisions. So we don't have any subs or lots that are a mile long. So interestingly enough, I had not thought this would be something we'd be dealing with, or I would be dealing with in my role as a supervisor and a township board member, but now we are forced to. So we started talking about how can we address this. If anyone's interested, I don't want to protest, please, but tomorrow night we're meeting with a group of about 30 residents, Lieutenant Toth, myself, and one of our code enforcement officers at the library, 7:30 p.m., just up the street here, to talk with these neighbors. Dan and his staff has done a phenomenal job meeting with the neighborhood already, but they will not be satisfied until we have an ordinance on the books that addresses target shooting. So it doesn't address the sheriff's office going in your house and asking to see your guns. All it does is say, ensure that you are shooting your guns in a safe manner that aren't going to negatively impact your neighboring property owners. So we're discussing it. We're discussing an ordinance. We are not looking forward to having a huge stand by the NRA or my good Republican friends at our township board meetings, because it's a legitimate concern. There have been bullets that have gone into people's homes. There's a gentleman on Clarkson Road that was cited for a reckless discharge of a firearm, which is a high misdemeanor. We have an ordinance on our books right now that addresses a proper backstop for an archery range in your yard, but nothing for a shooting range. So not everybody can shoot. We've done a lot of research. Lieutenant Toth has been extremely helpful, kind of looking around the country what exists. I think it should be a state issue personally. I feel like I believe in local control a lot, but I think when a local municipalities all try to make different sets of rules, it makes it really messy. The state of Florida recently passed a law talking about shooting guns on your property, and basically you just have to make sure that whatever you shoot doesn't leave your property. That seems reasonable, right?
Sounds good.
So it's nothing to do, what we're proposing, and if you read about it in the paper or you see it on social media, we're not talking about regulating people's guns, going in their houses, looking at serial numbers. We just want to make sure that the people that live here, and frankly a lot of the people that I've talked to that live in this neighborhood are pro-gun. They just want to make sure that when their kids are getting off the bus stops and playing in their yards on Saturday afternoon while their neighbor's sighting in their gun for hunting season, that they can be confident that it's not going to harm them or their children. So one of the unique ideas that Dan had, which I love, we said you can have a target range in your backyard as long as you're shooting toward your house. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if you have a proper backstop, what do you have to worry about? So that's kind of what's going on. I would highly anticipate that the township board will take this issue up in the near future. Pretty much every community around us has an ordinance. Oxford, Independence, Rochester, Rochester Hills. If you just look at our immediate surrounding area, if you live in those communities, you can look, you probably have a target shooting ordinance in your community already. We do not. Yes, Lynn?
Chris, are struggling with.
So,
I mean, you haven't specified what it is they're asking.
they want an ordinance. They want a target shooting parts of the township you can hunt in legally. You can hunt across the street in Ball Mountain State Recreation Area. You can't hunt in south of here. So they want an ordinance that's something that we can enforce. And so what we are contemplating, and so far the contemplation has basically just been between Dan and myself, is we recently passed an invasive species ordinance that has to do with the Phragmites and all this stuff. And there are teeth in the ordinance if we want to use it, but it's really educational. We haven't written one ticket, we don't intend to. We want to let people know these are dangerous to our whole, we have 42 lakes here. These will wreck our whole ecosystem if we don't be proactive. So we want to have the same thing. We want to have a tool that a deputy on a Saturday afternoon can go up to a residence and say, hey, do you have a permit for your target range? And the homeowner can say, yes, I do. Or the homeowner can say, I didn't know I needed one, which they probably will all say at the beginning. Hey, we have an ordinance, requires you to get a biannual inspection, meaning a deputy or a code enforcement officer to come out. Yep, you have a proper backstop, here's your permit. Then that also helps dispatch when someone's calling and they can say, we're hearing gunshots from 585 Clarkson Road. We can look and say, yep, they have a permit to have target range in their backyard, and we've recently inspected them within the past 2 years. They have a proper backstop. So we're not saying people can't shoot. Like the state of Florida's law is your lot has to be at least 1.5 acres and proper backstop and things like that. But it's one page. The Florida law is literally one page. So it doesn't have to be really complex. Bill?
I thought we had a state law that said you can't fire a firearm within 400 feet of any building in the state.
Hunting. It's distinct. A lot of folks think that that 450-foot rule is hunting. So the topic is strictly, frankly, the issue, it becomes an issue when you hear that, a 7mm mag or a 30-06, and we described it like this. It's kind of like the country lots are starting to back up to the city lots. And we understand both sides. It's a little discerning to the folks when they have their kids out in the backyard and they hear that those 30-06 going off, and they don't know. They simply, it's really loud, and they take their kids inside. And I think that's where, and some of them aren't even residents. They're actually coming down. They're driving past 4 rifle ranges. They come down to their relatives' home that have 5 acres in Orient Township. So I think it's, we talked about that, sometimes that common sense is common with everybody. We're not all on the same level there, but that's strictly. So I think when we asked them about handguns, well, we're not that alarmed when we hear like a handgun, it's off in the distance, but some of those large caliber, high-powered rifles, they're just they're alarming to the families in those neighborhoods.
Target shooting. We would say if you're firing a gun and you're not shooting at an animal, that would be.
Anybody can claim that.
What's that?
Anybody can claim that.
Well, we already have an ordinance in the township that restricts hunting in in small lots. There's only certain zones you can hunt. So if you're not hunting, the only thing else you could be doing is the target shooting. Right now, our ordinances are mute on target shooting. So anything else would fall into, if you're firing a gun, it would fall under this target shooting ordinance.
Because there's another category that would be a negligent discharge.
True.
So how do you distinguish between?
Well, there's already laws that address it.
Well, you're exactly right, and that's when we actually traced, we charged a resident with reckless discharge. And the prosecutor's office wrote the warrant, and the gentleman he put up plywood for a backstop, basically. So we talk about training, and I think that's what this is. It's an educational process, and there's all types of guidelines on backstops and target shooting, that we can refer to all over the internet.
And I think that was my point, kind of at my front end story is, everybody in this room knows what they're doing. It's the one idiot that doesn't that makes the rest of all of us look bad. And a perfect example, and he's not here tonight, but Terry Gonzer, former Oakland Township supervisor, got shot in the head at his CPL class by his instructor. He's alive. The scar on his cheek was from the CPL instructor. So that's a true story. And you see Terry, you can look at the scar and ask him how he got it. He got shot in the head by his CPL instructor at class. Yes, Jack.
You just got through saying, everybody here knows. We have an associate who has a friend who shot a deer in his backyard. The deer jumped over the fence into the neighbor's yard. The neighbor and them don't get along. It ended up costing him $12,000 to get out of that deal, with lawyers and fines and so what would happen with a gun? And by the way, I think it's a 30-06. He'll go right through a house. The house won't be a backstop.
Right. Because that's what the boss told me.
A little bit of time, please.
Well, you have to talk to Mary Ann. I see Carl's hand. Ross wants to ask a question too. Can we let two have it?
Okay, but make it quick.
Okay.
Which means not Ross.
Carl.
Ross, keep it short. I have a question about, the concealed weapons size gun. Can you really conceal and carry? I haven't heard that yet.
So we want to show them?
Just show them. Good one. That's a fair question. How big your
You need to ask some of these gun people.
Shotgun.
I don't have it on me, but I have one I can put in my pocket right now, and like, you wouldn't even see, you'd
Yeah,
see.
but that's a legitimate question. Okay, what is considered a really concealed weapon? How big, how small?
26,
32, 38, 45, I have no idea.
State law says under 26 inches was the answer we got from the attorney in the room. Ross.
Please. Chris, you labeled me, so I'm gonna take a fast shot at it. In no way, shape, or means do I mean the unresponsible use of firearms. And the comment I made to Chris when I initially heard about this was, don't affect everybody, all the law-abiding people, for a few bad apples. I mean, deal with them individually. Don't jeopardize everybody. And so I want to make myself clear on that. And the one thing I would ask of you, Chris, is to make us aware of when and if this discussion in front of the township board is going to occur. And the other thing is that it doesn't state that there should be no firearms discharge, period, in our township. And the other thing is, I don't want to have the right to shoot a rabid animal or something, attacking dog, or defend myself. And if I fire, then I'm on the list and so forth. Don't go after law-abiding people.
So we're not going to do any of those things that Ross just said. So does anybody do either at your home, locally, whether you live in Oregon or not, or if you have a place up north, does anybody like sight your guns in at your place? I'm not putting you on a list right now.
No, but I shot rabid animals.
So who raised their hand? You did. Okay. So the process would be, would you be offended if once every 2 years at $0 cost, we don't want to charge for a permit, we're not trying to make revenue, if we said you needed to have a deputy come out and just inspect your backstop, would you be offended by that? Not look at your guns, nothing to do with your gun, just make sure you have a proper backstop.
Yeah, because I got a 30-acre parcel.
Well, so that's
we don't use a
that's-
backstop for the pistol range.
True, that's-
We don't use a backstop on the rifle range on the part where we got 800 plus meters clear and open.
So that was a terrible
I don't have a backstop on the,
Ask me.
All right, let me ask Al. No, okay, so it's a different situation. You have more property. Al, do you do it?
No, I don't
Okay.
know, but I'm.
All right. Well, that's all we're trying to do. Yes, Joanne.
Right.
Joanne, and then that.
To do target shooting on your property reminds me of things going back about 20 years ago when we were much more rural than we are now. And in order to have a fire on your property to burn stuff, you had to get a burn permit from the fire department. And all the hooting and hollering that went on at that time. I mean, you'd have thought we were going to do away with marshmallow roast the way people were carrying on. I mean, to me, I think, you know, what you are proposing sounds reasonable. And over time, people came to agree that, yeah, getting a permit to have a fire and have the fire container be inspected by someone from the fire department made sense, because I don't want to have to worry about that crazy neighbor next door who feels he can go burn anything he wants anytime he wants.
And that's a perfect way of wrapping it right there. But I would just say that's a really good summary of what we're trying to do. We're not trying to take people's guns away or their rights. We're trying to make sure that the people that live here that even are pro or gun or anti-gun but feel safe that their kids can play outside. And we had a similar, related scenario relating to guns a few years back at CVS. These, I would almost call them alt-right groups, but they would come out and they would, in full gear with full guns, and 911 would blow up. And they were pushing for an altercation with law enforcement. And you can still to this day, if you Google Deputy Paul Buell, B-U-H-L, there's a video that was taken at the front of the CVS on Baldwin Road by Bad Brad's that I think has over 2 million views. And Deputy Buell did a phenomenal job, not infringing on the gentleman's rights, telling him he has exactly a right to do what he did. But you're causing so much alarm at rush hour for what purpose, right? We want to handle these issues. We don't want our board meetings to be flooded with people saying we're trying to take away their guns. We're not trying to do that. We want to educate people. You're welcome to come to the library tomorrow to our board meetings when we discuss this. But just make sure, and that's what I told Ross, before we send out these mass emails, which we're all really good at, let's make sure we have the right information, that we're not trying to take people's
That's gonna
guns.
spoil all.
I know.
Thank you. I do have one quick comment. Maybe you can answer, maybe somebody else up here can answer, but would not the backdrop requirements be different depending on what you're shooting? So how would you regulate that? Without looking at somebody's guns, how would you regulate
You actually
that?
brought up a really good point. I have no idea. But the reason I said that is because kind of our action item is going to be to, there's a couple people in this neighborhood that really want to be on a committee. I don't think this is a township board thing that we're going to just write this ordinance. So if there's anybody in this room that has expertise and would like to be interested and would be interested and willing to assist, we're looking to put together a 5 to 10 member citizen committee that could give us some recommendations to answer questions like what you just asked.
I have to be in the township?
No.
I have a recommendation for that question, is permit them not to exceed a certain caliber.
Well, then we get into checking people's guns, which I'm nervous about. But I don't disagree, but that's, we've sort of already said to the pro-gun people, we're not going to get into your guns.
NRA has specs.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Sorry, you wanted to volunteer?
He took the mic back again.
All right, we'll see. If you're interested in that, please see me afterwards, or come visit me in that white building anytime during the week.
Chris will stick around and take your questions afterwards. Thank you. Okay, we really need to get moving because we are really late here. So, Al, if you will, come on up really quickly.
Stars. As you can see, we have on the right side, it's going to be our new community access TV show. We went for training last night for 2 hours, and we'll go for training for a number of nights going forward. We're going to have a half-hour-long program. It's going to feature topics that will be interesting to people in this room, elected representatives who might be running. We'll try to have a Vox Populi man on the street section so we can get the word out about GOGOP and about conservative issues, and also learn what the people have to say out there to us. So look for that in the future. We'll be having it on the GOGOP website, and we'll keep you posted. And if there's any interest in being a part of it, please see me or Mary Ann. Thank you.
Again, we are looking for people that want to get involved. This is your show. On your table, there are pens and 3x5 cards. If you have an interesting topic or a question that you want to see handled, write it down and give it to us. Okay, moving on. Lori Fisher.
I think they want me to beg you for dues money, so I won't have to do these anymore. If you have any questions, feel free to ask or email us, of course. We're not trying to hide anything.
You want embezzlement, right?
No embezzlement. I would not be here if I was smart enough to embezzle money.
You wouldn't get it far.
Be enough to pay.
That's true too.
So when you're emailing your questions to her and she's in the Bahamas, we might start to worry.
Yeah, if you don't see me for a few months or I have a really nice tan, then you
Or come to the leadership meetings and we'll do the treasurer's report then.
Hey, also, just keep in mind, thank you all for coming, since we flip-flopped the meetings, leadership and regular meeting, and just know this will be that way going forward. So if you see anybody here who you think, or don't see someone here who'd like to attend, just remind them that we have changed that for 2018.
Agenda. I know Joanne would kill me, and Joanne, while you were gone the other day, Teresa took over as secretary, and she was yelling at me for jumping the agenda and doing all kinds of crazy stuff too. So you left her in good hands. So now we're up to Teresa. Teresa's going to do the club elections.
I know you had a slide.
Yes,
I
that's a slide.
did. The computer crashed. It's in here somewhere.
Okay. Well, then I get to add it. So
There it is.
there we are. So we have GOGOP is the largest club in Oakland County, possibly the state of Michigan. Meetings like this do not come together haphazardly. We have an issues committee that puts together topics like this, but we also have a lot of dedicated officers who put in countless hours to help make sure that these events come off smoothly, and that we plan a series of activities over the course of the year, as well as make sure that all of our members are properly noted, and we have a secretary with in Joanne's case, parliamentary experience to make sure we stay on task. So this year, we do have our elections rotate from year to year. This year, there are 4 positions that are up for election. The president position, the secretary, the activities vice president, and the membership vice president. The president currently is Mary Ann Henry. The activities VP is Al Hassinger. The membership vice president is Teresa Fiorani. And I did skip Joanne on purpose because I wanted to mention that we have been fortunate for the last couple of years to have Joanne Van Tassel as our secretary, the Orion Citizen of the Year for 2016, and she has done a yeoman's job in making sure all of us stay on task. Of those officer positions, Joanne has said that she has a lot of other things going on in the community, and she is going to step down from the secretary position. So we do have an open secretary position that will be up for election in November. As well as Teresa Fiorani has said that she would like to step down from the membership position, as she also has other things that she would like to be doing. So we do have 2 open positions that are available. We're still waiting to hear from Al and Mary Ann as to whether or not we can twist their arms for another term. But that doesn't mean that their positions can go unchallenged. So if you are interested in getting involved with the Greater Oakland Republican Club as an officer, these are the 4 opportunities that are available for you. You do need to be a paid member of this club in order to vote at our elections in March. In order to run for office, we do also have in our bylaws some requirements for the amount of time that you need to be active. So you can't just walk in tonight, pay your $20, and run to be president in March. You do need to be active and involved with the club for at least a year, as well as these other positions. So if you are interested in running for one of them in the future, volunteer to be on one of our committees, and then we can get you into run for office next year. So if you are interested in running for any of these positions, please see Mary Ann, Al, Joanne, or Teresa to find out more about what the positions do, and then we will put your name in nomination for February with the elections in March. So that's our board thing. I know Al's going to come up and talk to you about activities that are coming up, but from a gun perspective, the Oakland County Republican Party, myself, we are sponsoring a women's night at a gun range next week, January 18th. So if you are someone who is a woman that is interested in learning more about how to handle a handgun, please let me know, because we are doing it in a small group. There's only 10 of us. We'll have 2 instructors on the range at double action, and this way you can come and learn more about guns next week, January 18th. Also on January 17th, if you're curious about being a precinct delegate and didn't sign your form tonight, come to OCRP on Wednesday, January 17th, to learn more about precinct delegates and getting your forms filled in and notarized, and maybe I'll tell you what the precinct delegate number will be for next year. With that, I'll turn it over to Al.
And thank you, Teresa. And you can see we have some upcoming events that we'd encourage everybody to attend. Fundraiser for John James, a very nice young man. I've met him. He's going to be running to take Debbie Stabenow place at Meloche. So check this guy out. He is terrific. Also, office hours for Jim Tedder at Mr. B's Roadhouse up in Clarkston. Red, White, and Bubbly, the rescheduled Red, White, and Bubbly, I believe, on the 12th at Adams Woods Clubhouse. That's in Bloomfield Hills. Jim Tedder's office hours, you can see Great Lakes Family Restaurant in Waterford. We'll have an issues committee at Pete's Coney in Orion on the 15th. Fundraiser for John Riley, so check that out. Our local representative, Canterbury Village, 7 o'clock, so right here, 7 o'clock on the 17th. Leadership meeting at my house on the 6th in February. We encourage everybody to attend. It's a little bit of boilerplate about the functioning of the club. We also have a lot of socialization afterwards, so we'd encourage you to stop by for a cocktail or just some socialization. Pancakes and Politics, 9 o'clock on the 10th. To be determined? No, it has been determined.
It's in the email they're getting tomorrow.
Okay, email tomorrow. And then, of course, on the 13th, our general meeting for February. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I've got Lynn back there with Raffle Tickets. So, Lynn, are you selling those tickets, or did you buy them?
I'm selling.
So, unless you guys buy them from the
Okay, so Jim is going to walk around and sell raffle tickets. We have a really gorgeous, this is the Christmas ornament. It's absolutely gorgeous. So, Carl, buy some raffle tickets, please?
That's a undisclosed bunker in the
That's all
lower
I'll
level
go
of
for.
the castle where you buy those.
Yeah.
Mr. Tedder, we have hired.
Awesome.
And then we also have the Trump Bitcoin.
Yeah, what do they go for? What do the raffle tickets go for?
A buck a piece
A buck a
or
piece.
special price of 50 for 50.
Oh, wow.
That's why he's head of the tax coalition.
That's right, I'm tax policy chairman.
Okay, so while Jim is doing that, let's go to the last thing. Do we have any additional comments or questions from the membership? Always my heart drops when I see Jim Tino raise his hand. Sorry. Okay, yes, Mr. Tino.
No, I was just kidding.
Oh, you were just. All right, can I, if there's nothing, I don't see anybody with any comments, let's move to adjourn.
No, I want to buy tickets.
Okay.
After the adjournment.
Yeah.
We have to meet.
Yeah, we'll draw. Okay, all those in favor?